With Plan B emergency contraception, we're in control of our future. It's backup birth control you take after unprotected sex that helps prevent pregnancy before it starts. It works by temporarily delaying ovulation, and it won't impact your future fertility. Plan B is available in all 50 U.S. states at all major retailers near you, with no ID, prescription, or age requirement needed. Together, we've got this. Follow Plan B on Insta at Plan B One Step to learn more. Use as directed.
You can't reason with the sun. Trust us, we've tried. This summer, it's time to put that angry ball of fire on mute. Columbia's OmniShade technology is engineered to protect you from the sun's harsh rays that can burn and damage your skin. The sun is relentless, but so is our gear. Level up your summer at Columbia.com to spend more time outside and less time slathering on aloe lotion. You're welcome. Columbia, engineered for whatever.
You know, when it comes to the type of horror that actually scares me, you might be surprised to find that it's pretty wide-ranging. Stories of haunted houses, ghostly voices and laughter, and body horror all come to mind. But my favorite of all, the thing that gets under my skin the most, is religious horror and stories of demons, possession, and exorcism. I came across today's story, A Therapy Session, and its author, C.A. Serna, about 18 months ago. And as soon as I got done reading, I knew I wanted to narrate it. And I did, in the Red Treehouse episodes 110 and 111. But more recently, when I started planning for Midnight Horror Stories, I also knew I wanted to remaster the narration and offer it in one episode rather than two, and make it more atmospheric and immersive. So along the way, you're going to hear music and sound effects, all intended to guide you towards the end. A Therapy Session is one of those stories that takes you down a dark, twisted path whose curves you only see after you've come upon them. C.A. packs his writing with tension, anxiety, and an underlying dread that convinces you, for sure, that something really bad is going to happen. And it does, but maybe not the way you think. It's a stressful read for sure, but more than that, it's haunting. It lingers. And for me, it's a story that I think about often, and I hope that by the time you're done listening, it'll stick with you too. I'm thrilled to narrate it for you, so sit back, turn down the lights, pull up the covers, turn up the volume, and pay close attention as I narrate A Therapy Session, written by C.A. Serna. I'm Will, and you're listening to Midnight Horror Stories.
Tomorrow morning is knocking. Stock your fridge now. How about a creamy mocha frappuccino drink? Or a sweet vanilla? Smooth caramel maybe? Or a white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Find Starbucks Frappuccino drinks wherever you buy your groceries.
A Therapy Session, written by C.A. Serna. Clyde was only 12 years old when his brother Mason died in a car accident. It happened on a bitter, cold day in Nebraska. Clyde was suffering in bed, fighting the nastiest cold of his life. It wasn't his favorite way to spend the week of winter break, but it was still better than dealing with old Mrs. Rosenberg and her bad breath. As he reached for another tissue to clear his nose, he looked out his window. The view perfectly captured the tall, leafless redbud trees within the frame. It reminded him of a painting his mom would create. As he tossed his tissue out, little white specks began to gently flutter outside. "Snow!" he exclaimed to himself. "Fuck, is it snowing again?" Mason uttered, standing outside his younger brother's room. He had just turned 16 and finally had access to the family minivan, a perk that he'd been happily abusing. "Mason," Clyde said, full of congestion. "Are you going somewhere?" Yeah, so what? I'm going over to Eddie's. But Mason, Mom said, I know what she said. It's fine. It's barely snowing right now. Plus, I'll be back before Mom and Dad get home. Promise. Clyde's voice was serious. His face was intense. His stare unrelenting. Clyde wasn't like the other kids his age. His imagination was growing at an accelerated rate. But instead of spending his time in the clouds, he obsessed over fear. Dark, intrusive thoughts corrupted his mind the way venom could eat away flesh. Poor young Clyde didn't even know the word anxiety. He couldn't explain it, not even to his own mother. And he tried. All he knew was how it felt, how it boiled his blood, churned his stomach, and twisted his imagination. To him, it was only known as the bad feeling. Mason looked at his brother's face and felt sympathy. He hadn't had a soft spot for his brother since maybe the day he was born. He felt like something was wrong, like his brother was trying to tell him something. A warning, maybe. He looked at Clyde's frightened eyes and said, "All right, Clyde. I promise." There was shock on Clyde's face when he heard his name. He tried to think of a time when Mason had said it before, but he couldn't. Clyde got a lot of nicknames over the years, mostly bad words, but he never heard his brother call him Clyde. For a quick second, it truly felt like he had a brother. He watched Mason pull out of their driveway from his window, then felt a shiver. That was the last time he'd see his brother. The next thing Clyde remembered was being woken up by his mother. She looked absolutely hysterical, with panic in her eyes and wavering in her voice. "Clyde, do you know where Mason is?" Clyde didn't respond. "Baby, please, I need you to tell me where Mason is." Clyde still didn't respond. A combination of his cold, the grogginess from waking up, and the cough syrup he'd taken earlier made him as useless as a glass of water given to a man who had already died of thirst. His mother was losing her nerve. "Damn it, Clyde! Say something!" She stopped. Her hand covered her mouth. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to swear. Clyde, please, for the love of God, if you know anything, tell me. No one is in trouble, okay? I just want to know where Mason is." This brave woman was still trying to hold it together, knowing damn well her oldest son could be hurt or even dead. Right on cue, the bad feeling inched slowly up his spine, spreading throughout his body. Clyde was scared all right, but his mother was terrified. "For God's sake, Clyde, will you fucking answer me?" Her voice rose. Her patience was gone. Her panic finally broke through. That's when tears began to fill her eyes. Clyde finally spat out, "Eddie's. He said he was going to Eddie's." In a blink, Clyde's mother had already left the room and was heading down the stairs. He could hear her scream to his father to hurry and grab the keys. But before Clyde could hear them open the front door, a luminescent flood of blue and red grew brighter until his room was completely lit up. That's when the silhouettes of large patches of snow were made visible during that dark winter night. Each flake, hastily ready to join others like it, piled firmly on the ground at least a foot high. "Please come home, Mason. Come home," his thoughts whispered. He sprang from his bed to the window and looked out. Clyde already knew. He always knew. He only had thought of this scenario 100 times or more after Mason drove off. He knew when the snow didn't stop falling. He knew when his mother woke him up in a panic, yelling and crying. He looked out the window only to confirm the nightmare he'd crafted in his head. His mother wailed a harrowing scream throughout the house. The longer she screamed, the deeper the bad feeling injected itself into Clyde's psyche. He knew to call his parents if Mason ever tried to leave when they weren't home, especially when it snowed. But Clyde didn't know about the incoming blizzard hitting the Midwest. He should have called his parents right away, even if it meant Mason would kick his ass. Then maybe, just maybe, Mason would still be here. Snapping awake from the weirdest daydream, Clyde, about 20 years older now, and going by Dr. Clyde Miller, suddenly returned to his office where he was sitting at his desk, confused where the distraction had come from. He had been reviewing some notes he'd written from a therapy session he had with Madeline, one of his patients. It was something he'd read that started it all. Just 2 words that he didn't even remember writing. Come home. Wow, I think I need a vacation, he said to himself. Dr. Miller had been a psychotherapist for the last few years and had finally just started his own private practice. He even turned his garage into an office. He loved his job, but exhaustion was starting to take its toll on the young doctor. He'd been burning the candle at both ends, hence the daydreaming. But he didn't mind one bit. Clyde was a fantastic therapist, at least he thought so, and he would go through a great deal for his patients. He sat back up in his chair. Why was I thinking about Mason? It had been some time since he'd thought of his deceased brother. It took many years of therapy before Clyde's grief healed. He learned while in therapy just how powerful the mind was. His fascination with mental health turned him to psychology in college, but his compassion for others pushed him to be a therapist. Clyde wanted to help people, just like how someone helped him in his darkest hour. And that's why he became a psychotherapist. All of a sudden, the phone on his left started to ring. The first ring had him shooting out of his seat. Embarrassed about his overreaction, he composed himself, then picked up the phone. Dr. Miller? Nothing. Just the numbing buzz of an empty line ringing in his ear. The call dropped on the last ring. Dr. Miller put the phone down and thought, well, that was strange. Then the phone rang again. This time he answered before the first ring finished. He picked it up and repeated his usual greeting. But still, nothing. He felt nervous. Something about this felt off. There's something a little haunting about answering a phone and finding there's no one there. The silence almost as loud as the thoughts themselves. That droning, abysmal silence. Why can't someone just turn it off? Help me. The call dropped. That was enough for Dr. Miller. He immediately redialed the last caller. It was their tone. It sounded afraid. Clyde wasn't sure. He felt like this person needed him. But still, there was something eating at him. It was invasive, trying to find a crack anywhere to seep into his mind. It felt like the ringing finally stopped. On the other line, a strong masculine voice, much different than the one Clyde had just heard, or thought he heard, spoke.
Hello?
Clyde lost his words and trailed off. He didn't know what he was expecting, but this wasn't it. His brain was firing neurons like pistons. But still, he said nothing. Hello? The voice's patience was receding. Yes, sorry about that. He cleared his throat. My name is Dr. Clyde Miller, and I believe someone from this number tried to reach me. The voice didn't respond. I'm a therapist, so I was just wondering if someone was... I know who you are. The voice dryly spoke, cutting off the doctor. Taken aback, Miller fumbled his words before spitting out. Oh, were you the one who called then? I did. I see. Well, how can I help you? Were you wanting to make an appointment? Clyde noticed his hand turn cold as he held the phone. There was a pause before the voice spoke again. Do you do house visits? I do, but I will let you know up front, I do charge a little bit more than if you were to come to my office. Is that all right? Sure, Doc. Spoken like a bone buried in the desert. He wasn't very fond of the nickname, but only said, Well, let me check my calendar quick. I can get you in a week at 2 p.m. Will that work? Tomorrow was the only response given. Tomorrow, he said with surprise. I'm sorry, but I can't book you for tomorrow. There's some paperwork that needs to be filled out. Insurance info. I don't need it. I'll pay in cash. Just need one therapy session. One. That's right. One. Now it was Clyde's turn to remain quiet. The voice started again. It has to be tomorrow. If you can't, then let's forget the whole thing. There it was again, the fear he heard in the voice. Dr. Miller recognized it the moment the voice finished. The doctor thought about his words for a moment before saying, "Okay, I'll make an exception. If you only need one session, we can skip all the paperwork, and you don't even have to pay me." He was stopped again. "You're getting paid, Doc. I don't accept charity, and I don't need your pity." The cold words were felt through the phone. "Well, okay," the doctor said, trying to sound encouraging. "Let me get your information then." The rest was nothing but business, and as the conversation finished, there was a sigh of relief released from the doctor's lungs. He thought to himself, was that weird or what? It was 8:30 a.m. on the dot when Dr. Miller arrived at the Hansen residence. It was a beautiful home, but matched the exact personality of the other houses on the street. Beautiful bloomed rose bushes guided up the stairs to a great big oak door that marked the threshold of this mighty abode. Dr. Miller knocked as the sun finally warmed up, beaming a gentle light onto the deck. It radiated on the doctor's face as he let out a sigh. It's another beautiful morning here in Nebraska. It was now 5 minutes past 8:30 a.m., and still no one had answered the door. He tried the doorbell this time, despite his rule of never ringing a doorbell before 10 a.m. The doorbell seemed to have done the trick. He could hear rustling past the oak door. The door creaked a bit, and suddenly he saw the face of a man through the window pane. The sight startled him so much he jumped back in fright. The door opened slowly, and out stepped a disheveled-looking man with bags under his eyes. A sign of poor sleep habits, the doctor thought to himself, starting his diagnosis. The stubble on his beard was way beyond the typical 5 o'clock shadow, as it looked unkempt and dirty. Dr. Miller had to breathe through his mouth to avoid the ripe, pungent smell that seeped from the house and off his patient. The clothes Mr. Hansen had on were covered in stains and had wrinkles all along his body. His jacket appeared to be the only clean thing he was wearing. Wafting a hot and presumably horrid breath, Mr. Richie Hansen skittishly said, "Dr. Miller." "Yes, hi. Mr. Hansen, I presume. Good morning, it's so good to meet you." The doctor spoke with respect and a smile. "Please, call me Richie, Doc." Dr. Miller's face slightly cringed at the nickname. "Understood. May I come in?" If you had asked Dr. Miller 10 minutes ago if he was excited about seeing the home, his answer honestly would have been yes. He lived in the older part of town, so getting to step into these newer homes was like being at an open house without the guilt of making an offer. But when he entered the Hansen home, he hid a face of disgust. It was like a tornado had run through the entire place, destroying and throwing everything in its path. The walls were covered in holes and scratches. All the furniture was flipped over. And with each step he took, the doctor felt some sort of debris that covered the entire floor. Entering from the front door, a small hallway led to the living room area, or what looked like it should have been the living room. To the left was a dining room with stairs leading to the top floor. Dr. Miller noticed the guardrails were shattered, overlooking the drop-off from the second floor to the kitchen. Richie flipped over a small, rounded ottoman and moved the only piece of furniture that wasn't turned over, a nice-looking recliner. "Here you go, Doc. You can have the big chair," he said, patting it on the back. "Actually, Richie, if you don't mind, I'd like for you to sit there. I'll take the ottoman," Dr. Miller said, keeping his philosophy to always comfort the patient. "As you wish, Doc." Richie flopped onto the recliner. When he finally got comfortable, he pulled a flask out of his jacket pocket and took a large swig of whatever was in it. He wiped his mouth and looked at the doctor, embarrassed. "Oh, excuse me. I'm being a terrible host. Would you like some?" The slur in his speech told his therapist more than he probably could have intended. Dr. Miller's face must have looked disapproving, because the second he asked the question, Richie pulled the flask away. Shame was written on his face. "Mr. Hansen, it's not even 9 o'clock yet." "No, I know. I'm sorry." The mask that Richie was wearing had fallen off. The facade of a straight shooter was gone. Sitting in front of Dr. Miller was a broken man. A man who had lost everything about himself. A man who needed his help. "Hey," Dr. Miller spoke softly in hopes of showing sympathy. "I know things are hard. You didn't even have to tell me, but I can already tell things are hard right now. I'm not here to judge. I'm here to listen." He swore he heard Richie begin to sniffle. "Doc, I'm not okay. I'm not okay at all." As Richie finished his statement, he began to weep. His hands covered his face to hide the agony. "I'm not okay." He placed the flask back to his lips and took another drink. The doctor allowed his patient to cry before continuing. He learned a long time ago that it was best to let them cry it out. It was just easier to have a conversation that way. When Richie composed himself, Dr. Miller said, "Well, Richie, I want you to know that I'm here for you. And if you don't mind, I would like to begin our session." The doctor pulled out a small recording device, clicked the button, then continued. "I want to give you enough time to talk to me, to get the most you can from this session. So please tell me, what made you call me yesterday for this session?" His voice changed from professional to friendly. And then Richie, slightly buzzed at only 9 a.m., cold-faced and without a grip of hesitation, looked at the doctor, then asked as serious as a judge, "Do you believe in ghosts, Doc?" The doctor smiled at his patient, thinking it was the beginning of a joke, but Richie's face never changed. A punchline never came. No laughter was heard. Still smiling, he asked, "I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you mean." "I didn't used to believe in them either. If you asked me that question a year ago, I would have laughed your ass right out the door. But now," he paused to sip from his flask. Dr. Miller's smile disappeared. He suddenly felt afraid. He might have just walked into the home of a seriously mentally unstable man. He continued cautiously. "Talk to me, Richie. What's going on?" Richie drank from the flask again, shuddered in his chair, and said, "There's some real dark history here in Nebraska, Doc. Did you know there was a group of Satanists that settled around these parts back in the late 1800s? The doctor felt his heartbeat increase. His forehead started to tingle with sweat. Carefully choosing his next words, he said, "I wasn't aware of that kind of history." There was a long silence. Dr. Miller took his chance and asked, "How does this relate to why you wanted a therapy session? What about the locust plague of 1874? Have you heard of that?" Losing patience, Dr. Miller said, "Richie, I'm sorry, but have you or have you not?" Richie's voice screamed from the top of his lungs, completely overpowering the calm tone of his therapist. "All right," the doctor sat up. "I've had enough of this. I'm sorry, Richie, but I think we need to have a real appointment at my office where I can properly diagnose you. And I'm worried about you. I have half a mind to call the nearest inpatient facility to get you checked because the doctor was cut off for the last time. This time by the sound of Richie standing up from his recliner and his gun's metallic hammer pulling back. Richie was holding a shiny, short-nosed revolver, and it was pointed right at Dr. Miller, freezing his blood while he stared right down the barrel. The doctor, now trembling, moved his hands up, pleading, "Please, don't do this." Richie was breathing harder now. That's when Dr. Miller noticed the gun was wavering. He thought, he's scared too. With a breathy tone, Richie said, "Look, Doc, I don't want to hurt you. I don't. But I need someone to listen to me. I need someone to hear what I have to say. And I know what I'm about to tell you is going to be hard to believe, but it's the fucking truth." Dr. Clyde Miller turned pale, and with panic in his eyes, fear present in his tone, he said, "I'll listen to whatever you want to say." "Thank you." Richie lowered the gun but didn't put it away. He continued to hold it as he sat back in the recliner and repeated his question. "Have you heard of the locust plague of 1874? Dr. Miller shook his head no. "Well, allow me to give you a history lesson, Doc. During late July of 1874, swarms of locusts completely decimated the agriculture of the Midwest, including Nebraska. You can read all about it. There's writing about a dark cloud overshadowing the sun. Then all of a sudden, everything was getting infested with these bugs. Homes, farms, you name it. Whatever the grasshoppers got their hands on, they destroyed. Well, you see, everyone back in the late 1800s were basically all Christian. A lot of people looked at this as a bad omen. There were even sermons comparing the locust plague to one of the 10 great plagues of Egypt. You know, from the book of Exodus. God had cursed them, and it was happening right in front of their eyes. Like most people in a time of crisis, they turned to religion. So naturally, a lot of people begged God for forgiveness for whatever sins they made to cause the plague. But there were others who didn't think they should have been begging God for mercy. They turned their hearts to God's favorite fallen angel, Satan. These devil worshippers begged, prayed, and even killed for Satan to save them. And you know what? Those Satanists lived better than anyone else around the area. A hatred began to grow for these Satanists. Maybe it was jealousy, maybe religious zeal, but whatever it was, they united and exiled those Satan worshippers from their homes. They literally took nothing but the clothes on their backs. Everything else was burned to help purge the area. Well, the rumor was these Satanists eventually found themselves some unclaimed land in southeast Nebraska. They created a small community, some called it a cult, but it was just a way of living. It was their religion. They even gave themselves a name, the Diaboli Locustarum, which roughly translates to the devil's locusts in Latin, by the way. So while these Satanists started their new lives, they also spent a lot of time and energy growing and plotting for revenge. All that hatred that festered among them for years grew and grew stronger, just so they could bring something evil to this world. They conjured a deity, something with powers beyond man and full of the hatred of all 7 circles of hell. They opened a portal, and a demon came to Nebraska. Reports say a total of 142 people died during the massacre. But everyone that died that night, they all died the exact same way. Their eyes and hearts were ripped right out of their bodies. They never found a single set of eyes or one of the missing hearts, at least none that were documented. The Diaboli Locustarum claimed these kills and credited their demon for the slaughter. So of course the Christians got pissed off, and outrage occurred. The only way to respond to violence is more violence. It was said that every strong-willed Christian in the surrounding area took part in what they called the Great Purge of Fire. Hundreds gathered in the village, and they burned every single house down with people still trapped inside. If anyone had tried to escape from their burning homes, they had guns ready to shoot them dead. But there wasn't any shooting that night. Every single member of the Diaboli Locustarum burned inside their homes, peacefully. About 60 people died during the Great Purge of Fire. Men, women, children, the elderly, they all died that night. Interestingly enough, though, days after the fires had finally stopped, when the embers of the homes had died and the charred skin was cooled, some of the Christians returned to bury the souls that were lost. But when they got there, they discovered every burned victim had their eyes removed and their hearts taken right out of their scorched chests. That was the last time anyone would mention the Diaboli Locustarum publicly, and the last time there were any signs of the demon. There was a silence between the two, a real tense silence. Richie was staring at his therapist, eyes widened, waiting for a response. but Dr. Miller was afraid to speak. The silence grew louder as time passed. Richie continued to sip from his flask, which broke the silence for a moment, but eventually the doctor began to say, "Richie, why are you telling me all of this?" "Because I need you to understand something, doctor. It all connects, I promise. See, this house was built a few years ago, when they expanded the city limits. It was prime real estate. They thought, the city's growing, might as well build new houses. But they forgot their history, Doc. They forgot about the darkness that still claims these parts. They built an entire neighborhood on top of the graves. Graves of Satanists." Dr. Miller still wasn't following. All he could focus on was the gun in his patient's hand. "I'm sorry, but please, enough of these riddles. Just tell me what's going on." The patient, who had been sitting on the edge of his recliner the entire time, sat back in his chair and took a deep breath before saying, "I didn't know my history either, Doc. My wife, my daughter, they didn't know either. How could they? When we moved in here, we thought this could be the start of our forever home. But we were very, very wrong." Richie took out his flask and tipped his head back to get whatever drops were left. When he finished, he tossed it across the room and watched it skid toward the dining room. The metal scraping the wooden floor broke the silence of the two grown men sitting in a room telling ghost stories. One of them was holding a gun. The other was trying to piece everything together, his brain processing like a computer in the 60s, trying to land a man on the moon. "Richie," Miller began, "are you telling me that your house is haunted by a demon that was summoned by satanic farmers because their crops and homes were destroyed by a swarm of grasshoppers?" Richie busted into a boisterous laugh. It echoed so loud it gave Dr. Miller a good scare. Eventually, the laughter died to a chuckle as he spoke. "I'm sorry, it's just when you hear someone else say it out loud, your brain recognizes the insanity of it all. And maybe it is crazy. Maybe I'm a loon." His eyes shifted toward the doctor, staring with the seriousness of an executioner. "But this isn't a prank, Doc. This is my life." "Then help me understand, Richie." The patient's face twisted. "You still don't believe me. I can see it in your eyes, Doc. You still don't get it, do you?" "I just don't know what to believe at the moment. I'm not going to lie, Richie. Everything you've told me has been very hard to believe. Look, I understand, I really do. I told you you wouldn't believe me, and I hate to tell you this, Doc, but I haven't told you a single lie." "Come on, Richie," Dr. Miller interjected. "You don't really expect me to believe you, right? I'm a therapist, not a ghost hunter. I'm sorry, but I don't think I can." The hand holding the revolver rose again. "It ain't over yet, Doc. I'm not done talking." Miller had forgotten who was in charge of this therapy session. He forced the fear down his throat and said, "Okay, then I'm not done listening." With a slight smile, Richie lowered the gun and sat back into his recliner to continue his session. "When my wife Marissa and I started looking for a house, this place was a godsend. It was everything we were looking for. A beautifully built home, a gorgeous backyard for my daughter Ellie to play around in, and extra rooms in case there were any more Hansons on the way. It seemed perfect. A family. Where are they then? The house looked great, but the second we stepped in, I felt something was wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, didn't want us here. The more I walked around in here, the heavier it felt. But there was a problem. Marissa and Ellie immediately fell in love with the place, so I just sucked it up, thinking maybe it was pre-house jitters, if that's even a real thing. I shrugged it off, and we made an offer, and a month later we moved in. Things were going great until one night, I woke up to some awful noise coming from downstairs in the kitchen. It sounded rugged, like a blender trying to turn rocks into powder. I turned to see if Marissa was awake too, but she was gone. That's when I started to get nervous. Marissa used to sleepwalk when she was a kid. But as an adult, she only sleepwalked when she was really nervous about something. Naturally, I got out of bed and headed for the kitchen to check on my wife and to see what was going on. Stepping into the kitchen, I saw Marissa carving something into the wall using the biggest knife we had. I gently tried to grab the knife, but her grip was tight. That's when I noticed the blood on her hands. She was holding the knife so tight that the handle was digging into her skin. I tried to grab it again, but the second I reached for the knife, she turned toward me, repeatedly stabbing my left shoulder. I screamed so loud in pain that Marissa jolted awake, still stabbing me. I watched her eyes turn from confused to horrified as she realized what was happening. It all just happened so fast. I just remember grabbing clean dish rags from the drawer to put on the wound, waking Ellie up, and rushing to the emergency room. Luckily, it wasn't anything major. By the time we got to the ER, the bleeding had already stopped. They cleaned up the wound, gave me some stitches and some pain meds, and sent us back home before the sun was up. Marissa got Ellie in bed again before she joined me downstairs in the living room. I was trying to calm my nerves with a stiff glass of bourbon. When Marissa came down, she sat next to me and I asked, "Marissa, what the fuck?" "I don't know," she said. "I was just falling asleep and all of a sudden there I was, stabbing my husband." "What were you dreaming about? Were you dreaming about stabbing me?" "I don't think so. It was weird. I saw myself walking down the stairs, pulling out the knife, and carving the wall. But I wasn't in control. I was just a puppet watching the strings control me. I just didn't know who was holding them." Then she snatched my bourbon and finished it. The conversation ended there. We eventually found ourselves back in bed for a few hours. I called in sick the next day, hoping to get some more sleep. While I slept, Marissa took Ellie out for the day. She didn't want Ellie to go into the kitchen, for obvious reasons, so that meant it was my job to clean up her mess. That was the first time I got a real good look at it, and I'm not gonna lie, it freaked me out. I can't even describe what it felt like, seeing that ominous symbol on my wall. I eventually found out it was the symbol of the Diaboli Locustarum. "The cult of the farmers that were burned alive?" Dr. Miller asked, interrupting his patient. "How is that even possible, Richie? There has to be some logical explanation." "Logical, huh? Wait here just a moment." Richie got up from the chair, ran into the kitchen, and came back with a massive leather-bound book that looked as old as Nebraska itself. He cracked the book open to a dog-eared page and said, "Read this. The Diaboli Locustarum and the Demon of Nebraska. Not much is known about the Demon of Nebraska, which was supposedly conjured by the Diaboli Locustarum. This symbol not only represented their religious faction, but was believed to be a calling card for their demon. It was written that the Locustarum marked every home with this symbol so the demon would know which houses to attack. A few of the victims left behind diaries full of these symbols and describing them before their ghastly demise. The symbol made the doctor uneasy. It had power, ungodly power. The energy it emitted felt like radiation. The longer he stared, the sicker he felt. The wicked illustration started to bring back a familiar feeling. A bad one. The doctor turned his gaze away and asked Richie to close the book. Standing up, he felt lightheaded. The room began to spin, his vision distorted, and he wasn't sure where he was anymore. At that moment, the air became so heavy. A grim aura filled Clyde's lungs like black smoke. With every breath he took, he felt his airways tighten until he started choking, which forced him to his hands and knees, like a man begging for God to hear his prayers. Panic raged through his bloodstream. It was here. The bad feeling had returned. Everything froze. The room went quiet. There was a whisper. "Come home, Clyde. Come home." "Doc, you all right?" Miller nodded. Moving from the floor, he sat back onto the ottoman and said, forgetting his manners, "What the fuck just happened?" That's exactly what I said when I first looked at it. Doc, this book is from 1934, and it has the same fucking symbol that Marissa made on our wall. Don't tell me there's a logical explanation for that. Unless you got a logical explanation why the symbol made you fall to your knees. Dr. Miller didn't have a response. He didn't have an explanation. There wasn't one. His sudden reunion with the bad feeling made Richie's story more believable. Richie took the doctor's silence as his answer, and he continued. A couple weeks ago, Marissa and I were sleeping, when suddenly, I woke up to Ellie screaming bloody murder. I didn't hesitate. I jumped right out of bed and rushed to her room. Her door was closed, which wasn't how we left it. I tried twisting the handle, but it was locked. I didn't think. I just reacted and started breaking down her door. I was yelling out her name, hoping to get her to answer me, but it wasn't working. That's when Marissa caught up to me. "What's happening?" she hollered, angry and afraid. Marissa tried to pull me away from the door, but it didn't matter. I had finally broken in. I barged through that door and looked right at Ellie, and I couldn't believe it. There she was, her little 7-year-old body, bundled with her favorite blanket. Her face was lit by the moonlight. She looked so peaceful. I can still picture her laying there, in her Hello Kitty pajamas, Teddy wrapped in her arms. As I looked at her, I thought, she couldn't be sleeping. With all the noises I made while busting the door down, how could she have been asleep? The dreadful thought of my child being dead drove me to start shaking her awake, maybe a little too aggressively. Marissa begged me to quit, but I couldn't hear her. I couldn't hear anything at this point. The adrenaline was the loudest thing in my head. She had to tackle me to stop, and that's when I snapped out of it. It was unbelievable. All of a sudden, it was just quiet. That's when Ellie's little head popped up from the bed. I saw her deep blue eyes peep open with confusion and sleepiness. Marissa and I got up from the floor. She told me to leave the room and that she was going to get Ellie back to sleep. I returned to our bedroom, ashamed and embarrassed. It didn't take long for Marissa to return, but she was pissed. As soon as she got into bed, she asked me with a very sharp tone, "What the hell was that?" "What are you talking about? You didn't hear her screaming. Then we just find her asleep like nothing happened." "Rich, you were the only one screaming," my wife said with conviction. You know that moment when you truly believe in something that you'd fight tooth and nail for, maybe even die for, only to find out it wasn't true. It's never been true, and you're left feeling like the craziest person in the world. That's what it felt like when she responded. I asked my wife, "You really didn't hear her scream?" She argued back, "No, I'm going back to sleep. We can talk about this in the morning." But I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear Ellie's haunting screams echoing in my ears, replaying over and over. I didn't sleep that night until I got out of bed and lay outside Ellie's room, like a damn dog. I had to convince myself that it was all just a bad dream, but that bad dream would soon turn into a living nightmare. All of us started hearing voices through the walls. Our furniture would levitate, then fly across the room for no reason. And, I kid you not, one afternoon a sea of birds started dive-bombing into the backyard. I was mowing the yard when the sun just disappeared, turning the sky completely black. I looked up, expecting to see a thunderstorm about to roll in. I would have never guessed that I would look up and see 100 birds falling from the sky. Each of them, bills pointed down, crashing into my yard. They flew down with such force, I heard each bird's body crack the second they hit the ground. I had to pick them up before Marissa and Ellie got home. I tried my hardest to shield Ellie from the nightmares this house was creating. But when our cat, Mr. Jingles, died, it was the beginning of the end. One morning, we noticed Mr. Jingles hadn't eaten his breakfast yet, which was odd for a fat cat like him. In the afternoon, Ellie wanted to search for him in the backyard. I didn't think about it and just told her to be careful. Next thing I knew, I heard Ellie shriek. And you know what was really fucked up about that? It was the exact same scream I heard the night I broke down her door. I bolted to the backyard and found her standing on our concrete patio, tears streaming down her face. In front of her lay a body of flesh, drowning in a pool of its own blood. It was our cat, or what remained of him. Mr. Jingle's orange fur was replaced with candy apple red flesh that glossed in the morning sun. He had been completely skinned. His legs and tail were gone too. It looked like something pulled them right off his body. His tail was tied behind his neck, and we never found the legs. That was it. That was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Ellie stopped eating. All she did was sleep. The house wasn't filled with her laughter anymore, and she never ran around the yard again. She was gone. Our daughter was gone. Marissa and I knew we had to get Ellie and ourselves out of this house. So while we started to look for a temporary place to stay, Marissa suggested that Ellie should begin therapy. Dr. Miller's ears immediately tuned in and asked without a second thought, "Is that why you called me?" Yes, well, let me explain. When we started looking up therapists for Ellie, we found your website and thought you were perfect. That's how I knew who you were, that you did house visits. I wrote your number on a notepad and placed it near the phone. I guess I didn't know who else to call when Richie's voice choked. When my family was killed. The words hung in the air like a dense fog. Dr. Miller couldn't stop himself from thinking about Mason. The events of that dreadfully cold day replayed in his mind, and he heard his mother screaming. Although he was still in the Hanson home, snow began to fall in the living room. The red-blue police lights danced in through the windows, and he could see Mason standing by the kitchen entrance. When they held Mason's funeral, they kept the casket closed, and Clyde never knew why. But now he did. A long piece of iron had pierced through the back of his skull and pushed its way out his right eye. It was a mile marker, the kind found on a 2-lane highway. But there it was, lodged through Mason's head. All sorts of gristle and fluid leaked from the visceral wound, but the hardest thing to look at was the eyeball dangling from the tip of the rod. Aside from the metal pike through his head, Mason wore the same outfit he did when he died. Long blue jeans, a hooded sweatshirt, and a winter jacket. Except now they were blood-stained and torn. Some of his limbs were missing too, ripped off their joints by the force of 2 vehicles sliding on black ice, crashing into each other. Doc. Finally, after what felt like centuries, Richie broke the silence. Did you still want to know why I called you? Clyde sat there and agreed to continue listening, like he had a choice anyway. 2 nights ago, Marissa and I both woke up to Ellie at the foot of our bed. She just stared at us with these hollowed eyes, and when I was about to speak, Marissa said, "Ellie, sweetie, is something wrong?" Our daughter stood there and made the widest smile I think I've ever seen on her. The kind of smile where if you kept it up any longer, there would be fear of it freezing on her face forever. I finally spoke up and said, "Elle, your mother is talking to you." "Fuck you, you limp-dick bastard," she hollowly said. "Ellie," Marissa said in a disapproving mother voice. Ellie's smile dropped as she turned to Marissa. "Shut your dry cunt up, bitch." Marissa and I immediately looked at each other, mouths open wide. "We're all going to die now," Ellie said before running out of our room giggling. We rushed out of bed to run after her, but our bedroom door slammed shut just as we approached it. While Ellie's giggling roared into a manic laughter outside our room, I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. Despite knowing it couldn't have been Ellie holding it shut, I still said, "Ellie, sweetie, please let go of the door. No one is in trouble. We just want to talk, okay?" I expected to hear my daughter respond, maybe even hear her tell me to go fuck myself or something. But the response we heard wasn't Ellie. There was another voice. I don't think I'll ever forget it. How deep it sounded. The raspy tone that sounded like tires on gravel. The piercing frequency like the bass notes of an electro-theremin. It only shouted 2 words. 2 words spoken like fingers on a chalkboard was all it took to turn our blood cold.
Come home.
Dr. Miller's face lost all its color as he asked under his breath, "What did you just say?" But Richie didn't hear him. He was too deep into his memory, reliving his nightmare. We didn't know what to think. We only looked at each other, terrified. Like the night with Ellie's room, I pointed my shoulder toward the door and ran full force with everything I had. I kept trying and trying, but it felt like running into a brick wall. Eventually my shoulder went limp, and pain burned my muscles. I had to ask Marissa for her help, and with both our strengths, we finally broke through. Turning on the hallway lights, we saw it, standing behind my little girl. The demon of Nebraska. This grotesque-looking creature had the build of a 6-foot linebacker and was as dark as crude oil. Besides the usual 4 limbs and a head, it looked nothing close to human. And no animal on God's green earth could ever compare to that ugly fucking thing. Even though the demon was just standing, its body rippled and flowed, like ink in water. The skin, if you could even call it that, looked almost amphibious the way light reflected off it, giving it a slimy gloss. But the thing that still terrifies me, even when I close my eyes, was the fact that it had no facial features. None. There we were, standing, facing this dark thing, and it stared back with what felt like a million eyes. But there weren't any. No lips, no nose, nothing. My wife screamed right in my ear, breaking me out of my trance, but before I had time to react, we watched the demon raise its hand. Ellie, like a marionette doll, followed suit. She raised her hand and held it out, mimicking the demon. Then, at the same time, both of them made a shoe motion toward the stairway. They sent us flying out of the room, smashing through the guardrails, down the stairs, and landing hard in the dining room. Dr. Miller turned to see the broken guardrails again, then trembled in his seat. As I looked up the stairs, I saw the demon of Nebraska levitating off our carpet, slithering effortlessly in the air, heading toward me. The demon picked me up without even touching me, and I watched those razor-sharp fingers slowly extend from its hand, moving closer to my chest, slicing every inch of skin it touched. Then, without any warning, I was dropped to the floor, landing on my head, forcing my eyes to rattle and shake. If that didn't give me a concussion, I definitely got one when the demon violently pushed me out of the dining room into the living room, smashing my head through the wall. I looked up and saw the demon turn toward Marissa. She was still on the floor, grumbling in pain, maybe unconscious, I don't know. All I knew was my wife was going to die. The demon lifted one of its arms, its palm facing Marissa, making her body fly toward the creature, setting its grip perfectly around her neck. The sharp fingers sliced right through her neck, beheading my wife right in front of me. Blood spewed from her body as her body fell limp to the ground. Her head shot upward, bouncing then rolling on the table. Black hands picked it up and placed fingers right into her eyes before pulling them back out of the sockets. It looked right at me. With no mouth and all teeth, that fucking thing grinned at me. Did you hear what I just fucking said? It grinned at me. And that was it. That's all I remember from that night. I must have blacked out after watching all that. Some fucking joke, huh? Why couldn't I have blacked out sooner? Why didn't I die with my family? Why did it let me fucking live, Doc? Tears flowed as Richie's voice grew quiet. There wasn't a reaction from the doctor, except that the nickname Doc didn't bother him anymore. Miller sat there, and for the first time in his life, he didn't have a thing to say. Not a single thought. Nothing. He didn't believe in heaven or hell, but if purgatory existed, this was it. Is that why Mason is here? And Ellie? Well, I can honestly say that I'm glad I wasn't conscious to see what happened to her. The next thing I remember was waking up and it was morning. Yesterday morning. My entire body ached, but I still forced myself up, wincing from the pain. I had to find them. I already knew in my heart they were gone, but I had to see it for myself. I found Marissa's headless body lying on our dining room floor. Her head was nowhere to be found, and I looked. But if I'm being honest, I'm not sure I wanted to find it. Between her breasts was a wide cavity. The bones from her ribcage stuck out through her skin. Her heart was gone, just ripped out. And you know what else? No blood. I saw it shooting out of her arteries like a fountain the night before. But that morning, no blood. I lifted her off the table, holding her one last time, and dragged her corpse to the basement, where I covered her up with one of the blankets, and then went to see what the demon did to my little girl. You see, Doc, I'm a man who needs logic, a man who needs answers just like you, so I started researching. After I placed Ellie next to her mother, I left the house and went down to the university library. That's where I found that book, the one that made you weak. They had even more books, archives on top of archives, all dating back to the late 1700s. I basically spent the entire day digging through archives, researching online, but I found my answers. The locust plague of 1874, the Diaboli Locustarum, the Great Purge of Fire. It's all out there. But no one knows about the horrors that lived here. Still do. You see, the Diaboli Locustarum never wanted to even the score. They didn't just want to win the battle. They wanted to win the war. And they did. They made sure that no matter what happened to them, this was their land, and it will always be their land. Why else would they just let themselves be burned alive? I don't think they were just sitting in their burning homes, playing cards, ready for Grandma to finish cooking. They would have retaliated. I mean, there has to be a reason they didn't fight. And you know why? Because they opened a portal, but it was never closed. And the only ones who could close it were burned alive over 100 years ago. There was a pause. Richie was waiting for his therapist to say something, but the doctor was no longer in. It was just Clyde Miller, numb, terrified, and really wishing he took Richie's offer for the flask when he had the chance. Doc. Returning, remembering where he was, Clyde answered, "Yes, Richie. I just wanted to thank you for listening to me. That's all." Richie pointed toward the small recorder by Dr. Miller. "I see you've been recording us." "Yeah, I record all my sessions for notes." "I know. So listen." His voice cleared. His mannerism changed. He wasn't the depressed-looking, trauma-filled man he was just a moment ago. Richie's eyes locked with his therapist's, and he said, "I've been watching you this entire time. I know you believe me, whether you admit it or not. I know you do. If there's even a fraction of you that believes me, you'll take that recording and you'll share it everywhere. Got it?" Clyde objected. "There's way too much sensitive information in here. That's a HIPAA violation. I could lose my license." "I never signed any papers, remember?" he smirked. "As far as anyone knows, you were just here for a visit." Miller bit his tongue. He knew he was outsmarted. "I can't leave this world knowing what I know, going through what I went through. People have to know. People have to know that some stories just aren't stories. That there's real evil in the world, maybe lurking around your home. We fight demons every day, but people need to know some demons can't be fought." He wanted to say something, but Clyde kept his mouth shut. By now, he knew it didn't matter what he said to Richie. He had already made his mind. This was the kind of determination that only came from a man who had lost everything. In less than 3 months, this man lost his family, his house, and now himself. The whiplash alone would be too much for anyone, including Dr. Miller, and he only heard the story. That was enough to bring back the bad feeling, the stoic fear of what could happen next, the unrelenting agony as anxiety gnaws at your heels, the hyperfixation of the worst scenario replaying over and over. It bruises your consciousness and distracts you from everything else. That's what the bad feeling was for Clyde. And as his patient looked through him, he knew that Richie was haunted by it too. For the first time, Miller understood Richie. "Okay, Richie, I will," he said, pocketing the recorder. Richie exhaled relief. "Thank you for everything. And here." He handed him the large book and a thick legal envelope. Inside were handwritten notes, a list of resources to look into, and a large stack of money. "It's about $5,000. I told you you'd get paid." Richie smiled and patted his therapist on the back. "Richie, I don't know what to say. I think it's best if we both stop talking now. If you'll excuse me, I think it's time I reunited with my family. Would you kindly show yourself out?" "Understood," Clyde said. He collected his items, including the envelope, and started making his way to the door, giving one last look toward the kitchen to see Mason, who was no longer there. Clyde Miller walked out of the Hanson home, closed the door, then... It was as clear as day. He stopped at the stairway and sat at the top step, processing what just happened. He looked back, imagining what just took place. He imagined time began to slow down as it all unfolded. The trigger, the chamber, the hammer, all three moving in sync, shifting from their restful positions. Sparks would light the room, but only for a brief moment. The hammer struck the primer, firing a piece of lead through Richie's brain, before dislodging and hitting the ceiling. Swiftly following the bullet would be a mix of maroon and crimson that'd splatter all along the wall, as if Jackson Pollock was starting a new painting right in the Hansons' living room. Richie's head jerked backward from the inertia rippling throughout his entire body, forcing his neck to bend and smack through the wall. His body would slowly turn itself, putting him in the perfect position to collapse to the ground. But gravity wouldn't find Richie yet. Any speck of blood or membrane that didn't stain the wall would be perfectly suspended in the air, held together only by equilibrium. As time unthawed, gravity's magic would carefully pull those droplets back to Earth, ending their journey. Richie Hanson finally came home. When these thoughts ended, Miller got up from the steps and walked back to his car with a smile on his face. He noticed he wasn't afraid anymore. There was no sign of the bad feeling, no numbing anxiety, no dreadful thoughts, no scathing pain. He was free. Come home, Clyde. Come home. What did you think of a therapy session? Comment on Spotify, and let's talk about it. A special thank you to author C.A. Serna for allowing me to remaster his terrific horror story. Even now, it's still one of my favorites. You can follow him on Instagram and Threads at caserna.author. And be sure to follow Midnight Horror Stories wherever you stream podcasts and on YouTube. And don't forget to leave a 5-star review. I'm Will, and thanks for listening to Midnight Horror Stories. See you next episode.